Hey everybody, I'm National Master Jesse Cohen. This is Summer School of Chess, and I cannot wait to discuss candidates with you. It was an exciting event of all get out, and in the end, it was Ian Nepomniachtchi that took the title. And so, come here in November, we're going to see some really awesome action between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi. But without further ado, let's get into the games right away. Hey, don't forget to check out our new short film, The Princess Gambit Revealed, starring the Tanishka family, directed by Bruce Tetsuya. A quick look at Ian Nepomniachtchi's Wikipedia page shows us that he won the 2010 and 2020 Russian Super Final and the 2010 European individual titles. He also won the 2016 Tau Memorial and the 2008 and 15 Aeroflot Open. Basically, the guy has a very long list of achievements. And then, we of course have Magnus Carlsen. Not to be confused with Magnus Carlsen, Swedish singer. Of course not. Magnus Carlsen basically does not need any introduction. Our current world champion from Norway, the Mozart of chess, the greatest player who's ever walked the face of the earth. He lives and breathes chess, and he's also one heck of a soccer player from what I hear. So, yeah, this is the matchup that we can expect in 2021 come November. And so, yeah, really excited for that. Also, check this out. So, little thing here that you can do. I thought that this was super interesting as well. As you can see here, in their entire history, Ian has a positive record against Magnus Carlsen when it comes to classical chess of 4-1. However, it's also important to notice that 3 of those key wins come from when they were only under 12 in 2002 and the World Championship for under 14 in 2003. So basically, 2 of those 4 wins came about 20 years ago. Are they still relevant? Here's round 1 game with Ian. He beats Anish Giri in this game pretty nicely. There's some key moments I want to look at with you. Nothing too exciting in this English opening. Although I did find that there was one really neat moment. Off the bat I will say this is not in English, unlike I've ever really seen. The anti-Benoni Spielmann-Geller variation, apparently. And this was key moment number 1. I really enjoyed Ian's bishop to b4 here. Just an absolutely stunning move. I really encourage my students and anyone who's trying to become a super advanced player that you have to try your best and counterattack and ignore your opponent's threats as much as possible. This is really neat. After b takes c4, which Anish basically had no way to go except accept it, rook to a3 puts pressure on the pinned piece. Notice with the pawn on b3 that was not possible before. And after bishop to e5, pawn f6, bishop d4, attacking the queen, queen a5, triple pressure here. And with the threat of taking the knight as well as knocking the bishop with e5, the piece is just going to come back into white's possession. And so this all went really well for Ian. But funny enough, it actually got messed up. And what should be a win earlier has basically become a draw. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't until bishop takes c4 that this actually was kind of a mess up. Due to king g7 getting out of bishop takes e6 variations and actually threatening to pile up on the pinned bishop with something like rook to c8. And Anish basically had no option except to give up the material here. If he tries to play something like queen c2 or queen c3, then obviously he just walks right back into the pin. If a move like queen to d3, then I think you have to deal with bishop to f5, if nothing else. And so this just doesn't look very pleasant for white. And so instead, Anish decides to give up a queen for a rook and a bishop, which sounds terrible, but it's only a point if you think about it. But Ian, with a very masterful style, is able to just squeeze this position, slowly but surely. And honestly, like, I am thoroughly impressed at how the rest of this game went down. Ian was able to win the remainder of Anish's pawns. I don't think most people understand how difficult this is. Like, truly, like, if what you see is just a bunch of random dancing, I assure you it is anything but that. White is desperately trying to create what is known as a fortress, okay? A fortress is kind of a situation that mostly happens in queen versus rook type of scenarios, where you have a pawn guarding the rook, and it just kind of locks the other king out, so they can't quite make progress. The pawn's already guarding the rook, and so it's just really hard. But Ian comes up with a really clever solution. He figures out that if he can just get his queen and king involved, that he can sack back. And at this moment, he has a very simple threat. If white does nothing, just a move, we'll take the rook. Sacking back, followed by forcibly promoting that pawn. And if you take it, then we take it, and we're just way closer to making the queen than you are. As long as we don't play the terrible move d2, allowing the draw, right? We play king c3, and then we actually make our queen first, and we win. So Anish resigned, and that was game 1. Ian's next key victory came against Wang. And I hate to report this, but if the news is correct, Wang has officially retired from competitive chess. Please don't quote me on this, but what I heard was that something health-related and the stress of chess. All I can say is this. I hope that that's not the case. Someone who is clearly as gifted as you are, it would be a true shame to see all that just completely go to waste. However, I will also say from the bottom of my heart that I cannot imagine how painful it must be to go to the biggest stage in the chess world, or rather the second biggest stage in the chess world, other than the World Chess Championship, and feel like you let people down, you let yourself down, you didn't perform the way you wanted to. You know, I can only imagine how that must feel. And I just encourage you to go through it, to push through it. If it's health related, then do what you gotta do. Your life is more important than chess. But if it's simply the anguish of defeat, then I do hope that you rise from these ashes. I really do. But without further ado, here is their game. It's actually kind of sad in a way to lose a Petrov defense, the copycat opening. It's known for its draws because of how symmetrical it is. And honestly, Ian barely even gets an advantage, if you can even call it that. He does push for some interesting play. He does get a bishop pair. But honestly, it's not really enough. Again, he gets some pieces and some nice squares. He sets up some fun little tactics, right? But at the end of the day, too many pieces just get traded off, and there just really isn't a way to win. But Ian just slowly but surely goes for small improvements. And one thing I've got to say, you know, there is no lesson on this that I've ever seen, but watch high-level grandmasters play chess and watch how often in the endgame they stick a pawn on h6, h3, a6, or a3, around, mostly on h3 and h6 though, or on h3 and h6, around where the castle king is. This pawn is a deadly problem in many endgames with a king castled on that side. Not only can it stand as a future queen if the h7 pawn were to ever collapse, it allows for possible mating problems for black if white's queen would ever get penetration on black's position, and it also creates some back rank issues, okay? Finds a way to penetrate. Oh, there it goes. Fearless. That's the key move. A bit of a hard move to see, But in this position, with everything going on, there's just no way to stop it all. We're threatening queen takes knight. More importantly, we're threatening queen to d6 mate. It just can't be stopped. Queen d7, check. Here, take. The only move not to lose the queen. Take. Deflection off the defense of the knight. And in a couple moves, Hao resigns. Ian scored again in the very next round against Liren Ding. Now, I will admit, going into this tournament, I was personally cheering for Liren Ding just because I thought that he had the best chance in a match against Carlsen. I will admit, however, I had not looked at the record that Ian already possessed. Starts off as a Ruy Lopez, nothing really special. There's a couple things I will note about this game that I do like, that I probably want to incorporate in my own play alone. Or not as well, I mean. One thing is A3. This Martinez variation is nothing new. However, it's a different way to play the Ruy Lopez from the standard C3 and D4 ideas to break in the center. This is like, Ruy Lopez and C3, C4 ideas go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's just like, that's what happens. But in this variation, the idea is that after black plays D6, they are threatening to play knight A5, which will win the bishop pair. C3 is the main move, and what it does is it gets ready to play D4 ideas, and it also prepares bishop C2. Well, the A3 move is so that the bishop gets to A2, but it's also to get a knight into D5. A lot of research has gone into this, but playing knight C3 into D5 first before playing C3 D4 is a really good idea. One idea behind it is because typically the drawback of C3 and D4 is that this knight doesn't really have a great way to get into play and usually goes through a very long process of knight D2, rook E1, knight F1 to E3 to F5 or to F1 to E3 to D5. And so if we can do this sooner, it'll actually save us a lot of time. Back to the game. Giving up the bishop, but planting that nice knight into D5. I was a bit surprised when I saw this move, I will admit. It does allow the shattering of black's kingside, but after closer inspection, there just is no way for white to launch a fast enough attack against black. Not to mention, after the takes and takes, black might even use the nice open file for their own business against our king. If I could learn to draw diagonals, that is. So, rook b2. And it might not seem like much in this position, but slowly but surely, Ian is transitioning into a good knight versus bad bishop endgame. And I cannot stress this enough. You want to get really, really good at chess? Go out there and pick up a copy of the book Positional Chess Handbook. That's what's going to take you there. That and a lot of coaching and training. But learning how to squeeze even the smallest advantages, like good knight, bad bishop, is everything at these levels. Definitely no queen takes d4 and light up bishop f6, right? Passed pawns must be pushed. Again, notice how it's Liren who is trying to put the pawn h3 to create possible mating ideas around white's king and also back rank things. Again, this is such a big thing that happens in many chess games. Clever, clever, clever. Not enough time to play queen f3, queen g2, mate, unfortunately. Don't take that rook, you're going to get mated. And everything is safe enough. Liren sacrifices a piece. I know it seems a bit like, a bit dramatic, but honestly, what is Liren supposed to do in this position? This pawn is just rolling, it doesn't seem like it's going to die, and black's pieces are just getting to really, really passive, ugly squares. There are many, many clear signs that death is approaching, so we get a bit desperate, but this just forces off the queens. And from here, it's easy. And resigns. If rook takes d3, knight takes h3, there's no knight, rook takes f3 in view of knight g5 check. And everything else wins for white. So, resignation! Then came Ian's dominating win over Alekseenko Kirill. Then came Alekseenko Kirill. Came Ian's dominating win over Kirill Alekseenko. I actually was pretty much a fan of the way that he played this Neo-Catalan without playing an early d4, just kind of really flexible situation here. And then he finally decides to strike in the center, and it just turns out that even though this queen is on c2, which can sometimes be a mistake in these type of positions because she could be a future target to rooks coming on c8, there's just not enough time to bring rooks to c8 too quickly. This pin is really annoying, which prevents b5 and bishop b7, and black's pieces are already kind of just wonky. A tough move to make, but black is desperate to get some piece activity in space. You might not believe it, but white is possibly already winning in this position. If you just compare the level of piece activity compared with the pressure and threats that black is currently under. For example, b3 is the threat due to this pin. The queen is also trying to guard b7 and guard the knight, and both of those pieces are also guarding e5. And so there's just a lot of pieces that are barely hanging on over here, okay? And on top of everything, there's another tactic. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop e4. And there's simply no good way to stop queen takes h7 because g6 would hang the bishop on f6, and so that would just be silly. So instead of that, queen a5. Clever idea by Kirill, but it does make the fork, but we simply sack back. And then clever e4 move, keeping this bishop amazing and this bishop dead. Notice that there's no bishop takes c4 in light of queen c1 check. That'd be bad, right? Resigns. Why? I know it might seem like black has some chances here due to bishop's opposite color, and if the queens actually traded off, maybe that would be the case, but the queens are not going to trade off, and there's just no good way to deal with any of this. For example, if king e8, bishop c6. If queen d8, if king d8, if nothing else, queen b6 check picks off the a6 pawn. If queen d6, then queen a7 check. And either you move your king allowing crashing on f7, or you play queen d7, queen takes a6, and another pawn has fallen. Now you have to deal with that passed pawn, and the king is still having issues, and this bishop is still garbage. It just does not work. And another devastation for Hao Wang was he lost both of his games to Ian, and this game especially hurt. It was down to just a end game, and you would not think that Ian would have squeezed this to a victory, but he did. It starts off in another Petrov defense, and to add more, I don't know how you want to put it, to add more injury to Hao. If you remember in the previous round, Hao lost the Petrov defense as black to Ian, and now he's going to lose the Petrov defense as white to Ian. Both sides of the same opening. On a personal level, that hurts. Nothing special at all. Symmetrical position for the most part. Really not too much to crow about. White has a bishop pair. Black has a solid position. Everything is just pretty normal and solid. Trying to break through on the queen side, trying to get some action going. And now, you know, the pieces are starting to look a bit better for Ian, even though his pawn structure is worse due to the d5 pawn. That exchange of pieces really did help out his army apply pressure. Now maybe ideas like knight coming into c5, hitting b3, or sinking into d3. And again, after all these trades, you would not expect that this should be a loss for white. And I don't think it is yet. If I remember correctly, rook e7 was a mistake. Because now, after that check, this king is stuck out of the game. I don't know if this position is quite losing yet, but I do know that the defense is very difficult already. And just like before, for the umpteenth time, a pawn gets to h3 or h6, which again creates so many problems for the opponent. Black is able to play moves like rook to g2 whenever they want to, forcing king h1 when suddenly there could be back rank ideas. It is just not a happy situation. Hao actually comes up with a way to sacrifice his pawn to win the d-pawn. But Ian cleverly plays d3 and gives it up this way so he can play the very powerful move knight c4. And I didn't realize how powerful this was until a bit later on, but this move simply prevents moves like rook to d2. White is going to really get hurt hard here, even with even material. This rook is keeping white's king cut off from the game, one of the most important pieces, and in addition to that, because of the pawn h3, there's all sorts of tactical problems. Fast forward just a little bit, Ian does this really cool maneuver to get his king to safety so there's not a bunch of checks and annoyances, and then he has a simple plan. I'm going to put the knight to f2 and mate you, and the only way to stop that is to sack the f-pawn, and Hao just decides to throw it in. There's just no good way anymore. Like, the position is miserable. He's already down a pawn. The g-pawn is probably going to fall as well, and it's just not getting any better at all. I know it might seem simple, and if this was your game, I would encourage you never to resign under any circumstances, let alone if you're only down a pawn. But at this level, they see the future, and they know it's just not going to work. There's been so much drama over the 2020 to 2021 FIDE Candidates Tournament. For those who've been paying attention or were paying attention, basically what happened is that Candidates was scheduled to happen last year just like any other event. But as we all know, the pandemic of 2020 hit and they eventually decided to cancel the tournament, but after 7 rounds of the 14 had been played. And then they finally decided to reconvene this April to finish out the other half of the tournament. And the tournament is over. And we have a winner. And that winner is Ian Nepomniachtchi, who will be facing off against Magnus Carlsen come, I believe, November 24th through December, I believe, 16th at Dubai at the United Arab Emirates. It's going to be a fantastic tournament, and I just cannot wait for this matchup. Will Magnus be able to defend his title? There's only one way to find out. Stay tuned. Don't move. Don't go anywhere.